My name is Rafael Morales. I fix things for a living. Wires, leaks, broken coffee machines, air conditioners gasping their last breath in the middle of July. You name it, I've probably put it back together with 2 hands and a little faith. I'm also a father. A single one. I don't wear suits, don't have an office. Most days, people don't even see my face. Just a blur in blue coveralls, slipping out the side door before anyone remembers to say thank you. And that's okay. I'm not here to be seen. But on a Tuesday morning that began like any other, I became the only man in a 5-star hotel who could keep the whole thing from falling apart. The Langston Grand Hotel sat in the middle of downtown like it knew it was better than everyone else. Glass, walled, gold-trimmed, standing tall in a city of ambition and million-dollar smiles. The kind of place where room service came with caviar and guests wore watches that cost more than my annual rent. I worked the guts of it. The boiler rooms, the maintenance shafts, the hidden panels behind the walls. I'd been there 8 years. Never late, never missed a shift, never asked for a raise. People barely knew my name. But that day, something told me it wouldn't be routine. Maybe it was the early morning air, heavy, restless. Or maybe it was the text from my son Lucas right before I clocked in chore. Papa, my Spanish poem is today. Wish me luck. I smiled at the screen. My little guy was 7. He had his mother's dimples and my stubbornness. He also had a gift for languages. Just like I did. I typed back, Buena sort camping, show them what you've got. At 9:04 a.m., the radio on my belt crackled. Rafael, we've got a situation. Conference room A, something's wrong with the AC. Big deal event upstairs. You better get up there. Fast. I didn't think twice. Grabbed my toolbox, hit the service elevator, and headed to the 32nd floor. When the doors opened, the heat hit me like a wall. Stale, humid, suffocating. Conference room A wasn't just warm, it was a pressure cooker. Inside were maybe 60 people, diplomats, executives, influencers, even a few recognizable faces from television. A global economic summit was happening today. Big money, bigger egos. People were already sweating, jackets were off. Someone was fanning themselves with a program printout. One woman was muttering angrily in French. A man barked in German across the room. Another scrolled furiously through his phone, trying to connect with outside translators. I stepped in quietly. No one noticed, except one man standing at the back of the room. He was tall, early 50s maybe. Sharp suit, no name tag. Eyes like steel, observing everything without a word. I didn't know it then, but that man was Elliot Crane, CEO of Langston International. I kneeled beside the AC panel tucked into the corner of the room and unscrewed the faceplate. Immediate signs of damage, a blown capacitor and a shorted relay. Classic overuse in a high-load room. It wasn't an impossible fix, but it needed about 20-25 minutes, and if the panel sparked again, it could trip the whole floor. I gotta work. Then, just behind me, I heard soft crying. A woman, mid-40s, Italian. Her lipstick had smudged from the heat. She was speaking fast, flustered. Her assistant looked helpless. No one could understand. Without thinking, I stood up, wiped my hands, and said gently, Signora, potato bean. Sto sistemando tutto, respiri. Gail sicuro. She stopped, looked at me like I had just spoken from heaven. Her breathing slowed. She gave a tiny nod. Her assistant's eyes widened. That's when the murmurs started. Another voice, harsh. German. The man by the back wall yelled something about legal standards, unacceptable temperatures, and liability. No one responded. The concierge looked like he was about to faint. I walked over and replied calmly, in perfect German. Bit bleiben Sie ruhig. Ich arbeite daran, in wenigen Minuten Word as wieder angenehm sehen. He blinked, raised an eyebrow, and backed off. Someone else began ranting in Arabic. I answered again, then French, then Mandarin, then Portuguese. One by one, I diffused the room, not with authority or charm, but with something simpler, understanding, and all the while, I kept glancing at my stopwatch. I had to finish the repairs. Fast. 10 minutes in, I was sweating too. Not from the heat, but from the pressure of keeping 60 people calm while rebuilding a fried control board with limited tools. Still, I kept moving. By minute 15, I had the new capacitor in place, rewired the panel, and began voltage testing. A tiny blue spark jumped from one node to another. Success. I stood, walked across the room to the master thermostat, and tapped a sequence of buttons. A low hum, a hiss of air. Then, sweet, cool salvation poured from the vents like a miracle. The room exhaled together. Someone clapped. Then someone else. Then the whole room. I didn't bow. Didn't smile. Just nodded and turned to leave. As I reached the door, I glanced back and caught the eyes of the man in the suit again. He hadn't clapped. He hadn't moved, but he was watching me closely. I nodded once. He didn't nod back, and that was the end of it. Or so I thought. Back in the basement, I changed my sweat, soaked undershirt, logged the repair in the maintenance logbook, and texted Lucas again. Tor, hope you nailed your poem. Let's get ice cream after school. He replied instantly, Wesses! Only if we can order in Japanese. I laughed quietly. Deal. I looked around at the room I'd spent the last 8 years in. Concrete walls, buzzing pipes, rusted lockers. This was my world, and I was okay with that. People don't usually expect much from a guy in a stained work shirt who speaks softly and fixes broken things. But somewhere on the 32nd floor, a man in a dark suit had seen more than I realized. And that was about to change everything. The next day started the same. 6:15 a.m. alarm. 6:17. Lucas climbs into my bed, draping his little arms around my chest. 6:30. I pack his lunch, peanut butter, apple slices, a note with a drawing of a penguin saying, I love you. 7:20. Drop off at school. 1800. Walk into the Langston Grand with my toolbox in hand. By 80:30, I was already under the south stairwell, fixing a faulty motion sensor. My knees cracked every time I crouched. My palms had tiny calluses from years of metal edges and heat tools. I didn't mind. Work like this doesn't require applause, just consistency. But today, something felt off. Not the usual kind of broken, something deeper, like the building was holding its breath. I just zipped up my kit when the call came through. Chore. Rafael, can you swing by HR before your next rotation? HR. That was rare. Maintenance usually had no business there unless it was bad news. Wiping my hands on a cloth, I made my way down the hall, walking past marble floors and velvet drapes that I'd vacuumed 100 times. I passed staff I'd worked with for years. Most of them nodded, some didn't even look up. But as I reached the HR office, I noticed something strange. The receptionist smiled wide. Mr. Morales, they're expecting you. 47th floor. I blinked. I think there's a mistake. Maintenance. That floor is. She shook her head. No mistake. Executive office. My heartbeat paused. The 47th floor was a different world. Up here, the carpet didn't squeak. The air smelled like cologne and polished glass. Paintings hung on walls I'd never cleaned. The windows stretched floor to ceiling, opening up to a skyline that made you feel like you were floating. I stood there with my old steel toolbox, grease under my fingernails, trying not to look out of place. A young assistant stepped forward. This way, sir. She led me to the corner office. The door was open, and there he was. Elliot Crane. Same man from the back of the room yesterday. Same unreadable expression. But this time, he wasn't watching 60 guests panic. He was watching me. Mr. Morales, he said, standing. Come in. I hesitated, then stepped inside. Sir, was there a problem with yesterday's repair? I asked cautiously. He chuckled. On the contrary. You probably saved one of the most important international summits of the year. I didn't know what to say. He motioned to the chair across from him. I sat, awkwardly placing my scratched-up toolbox on the floor beside me. He folded his hands. I watched you, Rafael. Not just fixing a machine. You spoke 7 different languages. You calmed people down. You read the room faster than any coordinator did. I looked down at my hands. It was just part of the job. No, it wasn't, he said sharply. Most people with a wrench in their hand don't de-escalate multi-lingual conflict while wiring a capacitor. I didn't respond, not because I disagreed, but because I wasn't used to this, to being seen. He leaned forward slightly. I looked into your file. You've been here 8 years, never late, never written up, speaks 7 languages, 1 dependent, no college degree, no formal training in hospitality. Yet somehow, in a room full of billionaires, heads of state, and world-class hosts, you were the only one who knew how to lead. I laughed nervously. Sir, I don't think leadership looks like this. He shook his head. Leadership looks exactly like that. Silence hung in the air. Then he stood and walked to the window. I'm launching a new division within Langston. A hospitality human intelligence program. It's not about luxury, it's about people, empathy, language, cultural sensitivity. Reading a crisis without needing a manual. He turned toward me again. I want you to lead it. My brain stopped. Me. He nodded. But I don't have a degree. I barely know how to give a PowerPoint presentation. I've never led a team in my life. You've led your son, he said quietly. And you led a room full of strangers yesterday, without a title, without a podium, without a translator. That's more valuable than any certificate. My eyes stung. I didn't know if it was from gratitude or fear. I looked away. I don't even own a tie. We'll buy you one. Later that night, I picked up Lucas from his after-school program. He ran toward me, arms wide. Papa, guess what? I got picked for the language fair next month. I'm doing French and Japanese. I hugged him tight. That's amazing, buddy. Can we go get ice cream? I hesitated. Only if you ask me in Arabic. He grinned. Deal. We drove with the windows down, laughing as the wind messed up our hair. I hadn't told him about the offer yet. How could I? I wasn't even sure I believed it myself. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee and stared at the city lights. What would Maria say if she saw us now? She always believed in me more than I believed in myself. Said I had a gift, not with machines, but with people. She used to joke, "You don't fix things, Rafa. You listen to them. Even broken air conditioners feel seen when you touch them." She'd be smiling right now, and probably crying. I held her picture in my hand and whispered, "You were right." Then I texted Elliot Crane, "I'm in. Just tell me where to start." The next few weeks moved like a quiet storm. One day I was rewiring broken vending machines and unclogging toilets. The next, I was sitting in executive meetings with people who introduced themselves with titles I didn't fully understand. Vice President of International Guest Strategy, Director of Global Experience Enhancement, Chief of Multicultural Communications, and me, Rafael Morales, maintenance worker turned what? No one had a name for my role yet. Crane simply called it Human Intelligence. E2. My first day in the program felt like my first day of school all over again. They'd cleaned out an old conference room for me, gave me a temporary badge and a brand new laptop I didn't know how to use. A digital tablet, a headset. A woman from HR walked in and asked if I wanted to personalize my email signature. I almost laughed. What would I even write? Fluent in 7 languages, certified in none, save the world with duct tape. But I didn't say that. I just smiled and said, let's keep it simple. Every day after that, I reported to the 47th floor. No longer to fix something broken, but to build something new. I spent the first week just observing, watching hotel interactions, reading guest complaints, studying footage of past incidents. I noticed something nobody had ever written down in a manual. It wasn't the service that made people angry. It was the disconnection. A woman from Brazil trying to explain her food allergy to a waiter who didn't understand Portuguese. A Saudi businessman looking insulted when the front desk staff shook his hand with the left. A Chinese mother panicking when her child fell sick and the nurse couldn't translate the dosage instructions. People didn't want perfection. They wanted to feel heard. By the end of the second week, I had my first meeting with Elliot Crane and 3 department heads. They expected a PowerPoint. I didn't bring one. Instead, I played an audio recording on my phone. A short clip of guests from 5 different countries speaking at the front desk, clearly distressed and misunderstood. Then I spoke. In this clip, I said, none of the guests are yelling. They're not being rude. They're scared. Their tone, their posture, they're begging to be understood. But the staff, they panic. They smile awkwardly. They look away. Why? Because they don't understand what's being said. And when we don't understand, we retreat. Silence. Crane leaned forward. So what's your proposal? I looked him dead in the eyes. Train the heart before the mouth. And I called the program Bridge Language, not just teaching staff to speak, but to listen with emotional fluency. We built modules that covered 10 global languages, but more than that, we taught how to recognize panic in different cultures, when silence is respect, and when it's a cry for help, how to handle emotional heat without losing your cool. I built role plays. I wrote scripts. I even brought in Lucas one day to act as a lost child at the front desk, and watched as staff members tried and failed to connect with him in a language he pretended not to speak. We laughed about it on the ride home, but not everyone welcomed the change. Some senior managers rolled their eyes. One asked, "Why are we taking advice from a janitor?" Crane replied before I could, "Because he sees more in the background than you do in the spotlight." 2. One night, as I stayed late preparing a session, Crane dropped by unexpectedly. "You know," he said, "my father was a military man. Thought discipline solved everything." He stared out the window for a moment. But one time, on a trip to Morocco, our car broke down in the middle of nowhere. It was just me and him. Hot, dusty road. We waited for hours. A mechanic showed up, barefoot, oily hands, barely spoke English. But he fixed the car in 10 minutes. Then he handed me a warm bottle of water and said, in perfect Spanish, "The engine listens when the hands respect it." He turned to me. "That mechanic reminded me of you." I smiled faintly. "I don't fix people, just systems." "No, Rafael," he said. "You see people. That's rarer." 2 months passed. The Bridge Language program was already expanding to other Langston hotels. I began traveling Lisbon, Toronto, Doha. Each time, I walked through the lobbies not as a ghost, but as a guest. Lucas came with me when school allowed. He loved hotel beds and room service pancakes. We'd sit on balconies in cities I never thought I'd see and whisper goodnight in a different language each time. One night, he asked me, "Papa, do you miss the boiler room?" I looked at him and said softly, "I miss the silence, but not the invisibility." Then came the email from the event director of the International Unity Forum. The same summit I accidentally saved. They were hosting a global leadership gala in New York. Crane forwarded it to me with just 3 words: tour. "You're the keynote." My throat went dry. The night of the gala, I stood backstage in a tailored navy blue suit, tie knotted by someone far more fashionable than me. My palms sweated through silk gloves I didn't know how to wear. I peeked through the curtain. Hundreds of faces, cameras, journalists, leaders of industry, and in the front row, Lucas, swinging his legs, smiling like I'd already won. I looked down at my notes, then put them away, and I stepped into the light. The lights hit hard when I stepped on stage. Not because they were too bright, but because, for most of my life, I'd been standing behind them. In the shadows, in boiler rooms, in stairwells, in spaces people walked past without looking twice, and now I was the one being seen. The applause was polite, more of a formality than anything else. I wasn't famous. I wasn't a CEO. Most of them had no idea who I was or why I was even speaking at a summit for global leaders. But I did. Because in a world full of experts, sometimes you need someone who remembers what it feels like to be invisible. I stepped up to the podium. No notes. No slides. Just me, Rafael Morales, maintenance man, father, listener. Good evening. I began adjusting the mic. I never imagined I'd be speaking at a gala like this. 2 years ago, I was fixing an elevator that had trapped a kid with a peanut allergy and an executive with claustrophobia. I didn't get a thank you, but I got a smile, and for me, that was enough. A few quiet laughs. I've spent most of my life fixing things. Mostly machines. Occasionally people. I speak 7 languages, but not because I went to some fancy school. I learned out of necessity. Because in this world, if you can't afford to be heard, you learn to listen better. I paused, took a breath. My wife passed away when my son was 4. After that, it was just me and him. No backup, no guidebook. Just 2 people navigating a world that often forgets the quiet ones. I looked out at the crowd. All suits, pearls, and privilege. But something strange happened while I was down in the boiler rooms and back halls of the Langston Grand. I started hearing the patterns between languages. Not just the words, the emotions behind them. Panic, gratitude, fear, frustration. These feelings, they don't need translation. They're universal. Now the room was silent, still, listening. I smiled faintly. Most people think language is about grammar and vocabulary, but in my experience, the best language is presence, being there, leaning in, saying, I see you, I hear you, you matter. That's what saved that conference room 2 months ago. Not a wrench, not a degree, just being human. Somewhere in the front row, Lucas was beaming. I could see his chest puff with pride every time someone clapped, and next to him was Elliot Crane, arms crossed, smile small, eyes full of fire, who after the speech, people came up. Not many but enough. One woman from Tokyo told me she cried halfway through. A hotel manager from Cape Town asked if she could use my story in her staff training. A teenager who worked valet nearby thanked me for sounding like her uncle. But the most important moment came when I stepped down and Lucas ran into my arms. You killed it, Papa! I didn't die. I laughed. No, I mean you did awesome. I know what you meant. He pulled back and looked at me seriously. Can I tell my class you were the keynote? Only if you say it in Portuguese. He grinned. Vos foi incrível esta noite. I hugged him tighter than ever before. The months after the gala changed everything. The bridge language program was rolled out across all 120 Langston properties worldwide. I was promoted to Global Director of Human Intelligence. The title felt ridiculous at first, but the work felt right. I hired multilingual teachers, former refugees, immigrant hotel staff, and caretakers with no degrees but lifetimes of emotional intelligence. We trained people to see beyond speech, to listen with intent. And slowly, something began to shift. In hotels across the globe, service didn't just sound better. It felt better. Guests who had once felt like outsiders started asking to return. Staff turnover dropped. Smiles stayed longer. To then, one quiet evening in London, I got a call from the Langston Grand's original front desk manager. A woman named Tricia who'd been there since I was scrubbing sinks. Rafa, she said, voice soft. I just watched a new trainee calm down a crying Ukrainian woman without using a single word. She just sat beside her, held her hand and nodded. When the guest left, she said she'd never felt more seen in her life. I swallowed hard. That's the job, I whispered. No, Tricia said, That's the difference. 2 years passed. Lucas grew taller, wiser, more fluent than me in 3 languages. He started asking questions like, "Do you think Mama would be proud?" Or, "Do you think we were meant to go through all this?" I'd always answer the same, "I don't know if we were meant to, but we made it mean something." One afternoon, we visited the Langston Grand, the place where everything changed. The boiler room still smelled like dust and copper. My old locker still had a sticker Lucas had put on it when he was 5. The AC unit in conference room still hummed like a machine with stories buried in its wires. I stood in that room again, same space, different man, and just as I was about to walk out, I turned and saw a maintenance worker, younger, nervous, sweating as he examined a broken ceiling tile. He didn't see me at first, so I walked over and gently said, "Need a hand?" He looked up, confused. "Sir, I've got it. I can handle it." "I know," I smiled. "I just figured you might want company." He nodded slowly. We worked side by side in silence, 2 ghosts in the walls, 2 listeners, and for the first time in years I felt home. I never asked for recognition, never expected a spotlight, but I learned something in all these years. The world changes not through noise, but through presence. Through the quiet moments when someone reaches out, speaks your language, or sits beside you when they can't. So if you ever find yourself in a room falling apart, don't wait for someone in a suit. Look for the one with tired eyes, a grease on their hands, and a voice calm enough to speak to storms. You just might find me there. In a world that celebrates loud voices, sometimes the quiet ones carry the greatest weight. I wasn't the richest. He wasn't the loudest. But he listened, he cared, and he changed lives. One quiet act at a time. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you know, or someone you used to be, don't just scroll past. Share it, like it, and hit that subscribe button. Because this channel is about more than just stories. It's about the people the world forgets, and the kindness that can change everything. Subscribe now and be part of something real. Because sometimes the janitor isn't just cleaning the floors. He's cleaning the world, one broken thing at a time.